It's always the support functions. And I have a theory. I think it's a lot of times it's because, not because the unwillingness of the leaders in those departments, but some leaders of business do not hold support functions in a high enough regard to be able to say, you need to change along with the business. They don't want to either deal with it because they feel like it's administrative and it's not sexy and it's not as interesting or creative. It doesn't get you on the front page of whatever Ad Age or New York Times or whatever it is by you saying, like, we transformed this accounting business so that we're tracking supplier diversity. Like, they think that that's boring.
Well, this is it. For the time being, this is the last episode of The Definition of Insanity. And I wanted to close out with a bit of a banger. That is to say, I wanted to close out on a subject that I knew would be complicated. Welcome to DEI. There's no way to have a conversation around DEI without kind of wandering into some pitfalls, without being wary of what you're saying and what the intention is and what people are hearing. DEI is a complicated subject. Now, I'm an employer brander, and I'm a big believer in what DEI is, but I don't think I've had a great conversation about what that intersection really looks like. Today, we're talking with Tara Turk-Haynes, who has really had a storied career. A lot of different roles, as you'll hear, a lot of different locations, but her focus on DEI has given her amazing perspective on not how to check the box, but how to make change happen, what change looks like. And that's really what the conversation today is going to focus on. The intersection between employer brand and DEI, yes, but how do we think better about what diversity, inclusion, belonging truly means? So, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tara Turk-Haynes. London calling. London, hello. Anyone here? This is professional, okay? Tara, what are you doing to me? You're clearly in my head. You're just making, I don't know where I am. I'm just losing it, and we've just started the button, and we've got a whole hour to go if we need it.
So I know it's Monday too. Can we just blame Monday too? I realize that
late in the day on Monday. Absolutely. I've only been drinking for like 3 hours. I mean, my goodness. With me is Tara Turk-Haynes, who I am super excited to talk about. So if you've been following the podcast, broadly speaking, you get the joke, right? You get this idea that let's talk to somebody in branding, let's talk to somebody in organizational change, let's talk to an actual live recruiter, slightly tame recruiter. And one of the subjects that I'm going to admit, hey, this is me opening up and admitting, I knew I needed to talk about, but I was legit nervous to talk about, was this idea of how does DEI, DEIB, call it what you will, how does this fit into the larger conversation of recruiting and hiring? And, you know, I've got some really good friends who I respect so deeply. This shout out to Torrin, shout out to Madison. And I got good friends. I'm just going to put that out. I don't know what that says about me, but I mean, you know, Torrin and I, if you don't know the joke, Torrin and I love to joke about mom says hi. We just tell each other mom says hi, which is great. Because if I make that joke and you haven't met Torrin, you're like, oh, I don't and then you meet Torrin, you're like, oh, it's a joke. I get it.
Oh, it's a joke.
I know we're very clever. We're clever that way. So what we're going to do today is dive into DEI. But before we do that, I think some introductions need to be made. So Tara, would you mind spending a minute or so kind of talking about yourself? Where do you come from? What have you done? Just, you know, I'll keep it wide open.
Yeah. So I'm Tara Turk-Haynes. I started off, let me back up. I actually started off, so I'm a playwright by trade, realized that you can't make money in theater. So always had a day job. And it started off being an, executive assistant. And I was that for a couple of years until I had a current mentor of mine, Beverly Carmichael, who used to be the chief people officer at Southwest Airlines, Red Robin. At the time we worked together at Ticketmaster. And for some reason, she was like, I think you'd be good in recruiting. Would you like to transition over? So I started off recruiting many years ago at Ticketmaster, in corporate recruiting. And, you know, that's important because it's about access. It's about somebody seeing something in you that you didn't envision for yourself, and believe that we should probably model a lot more of that And I've been in recruiting and HR pretty much ever since, with a slight detour. I worked at Variety Magazine in editorial for a couple of years, but I've worked in startups and large companies like Ticketmaster. Most recently was at Leaf Group, which was a parent company to multiple brands like Society 6 and Live Strong and Well and Good. That parent company folded because we got acquired by Graham Holdings, but those brands still exist. But I oversaw talent acquisition there as well as DEI. That was when I first got the actual official title of being in DEI. But I've always been a champion of representation in the workplace because I am a first generation corporate worker. Like, my parents were not in corporate, and so for me that has informed a lot of the decisions that I make and the processes and what's important to me in terms of my values. Since leaving Leaf Group, I have started my own consulting business. It's called Equity Activations, and we basically help small to mid-sized companies embed DEIB practices into their operations, because I feel like they will die if their initiatives, DEI is not just like extracurricular activities, but they're actually like things to make your business better. And so I know there's a lot of, terminologies and feelings as facts roaming around there, but essentially at the end of the day, like, having a stronger business should be the goal of every leader and every person. And so my mission is to make sure that I help them do that.
Sorry, I lost you for 2 seconds. So I'm going to make a note to make sure clean up the edit there. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm good. Are you still there? You're
I'm there. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You just kind of shut off for a second. I'm like,
Oh,
so
weird.
I'll just make a note to make it trim. Okay. So I guess we should have, given you're at Leaf Group, we got a quick shout out to Rona. Hey, Rona, how you doing?
That Rona was one of the best hires I've ever done in my life.
We have her in common. She took my very first employer brand class, one of my very first employer brand classes. So yeah.
Wonderful. If I could hire her at every company, I totally would. So thank you for contributing to her basket of talent. She has now a bigger basket.
It's a very big basket, no question. So obviously, I'm maybe not obviously. Why am I saying obviously? I'm a big proponent of DEI. I don't always know, given the demographics and the shape and color and the shade of my face, how to approach it, what to do, how to, when do I say something, when do I not say something, and all that stuff. So I just want to kind of set a kind of a baseline that I'm super excited and super interested. I just don't always know the rules of the game. And obviously there are no rules of the game, and they're making up everybody figuring out as we go along. But I suspect that there are a lot of people in a similar position to me where they want to play ball. We want to kind of jump in. We want to be helpful. We don't always know how or why. And we're just aware enough to know there's a game of tokenization we don't want to play. There's the performative bullshit we don't want to do. I attribute my feelings of all this to being bullied as a child, and say, look, all this to me is, it says there's no reason to bully someone else. There's no, and which is really what a lot of discrimination to me feels like. It reads that way of like, hey, I've decided to pick on somebody because I have more power than them. And so that to me is kind of like my through line into this conversation, just to kind of give some perspective. So any kind of first thoughts on how does someone like me, what makes sense to kind of just be how do I indicate that I'm an ally, I'm a friend, I want to help? Obviously, I know all the other baggage that comes along with it. I know what Martin Luther King said. I know what Malcolm X said. I know what's being said. I know the conversations. Point me in the right direction.
So one of the pillars that I stand on when I talk to people about DE&I and B is basically that we don't have uniform education in this country, which is kind of sad, because we are all learning different things about what's important in a country that we're all supposed to be united in, right? And so there are a lot of people who have been walking in privilege who don't know what anyone else's lived experience is. And so it's really challenging for those people to understand that we can be in the same room and have two totally different experiences. And so I think what's really important to understand that is, one, you have to be able to be the kind of person to be curious about that and say, like, how can I make it so that we don't have to have the same experience, but it's an equitable one, right? Like we can be in this room. I just don't want there to be power dynamics that prevent one person from experiencing what I'm experiencing. So how do I eliminate what's in the room that's not working for either one of us, right? And one of the things when I was in college is I had a professor who was teaching a class, and he said, what privilege are you willing to give up so that other people will have a better experience in this community and this world that we live in? Because you're going to have to do that. Even
Yeah.
me, as somebody who's in several marginalized groups, they're I can be in another group, a room with another person, and be the privileged one. So, like, how do we talk about that and normalize that conversation and make sure that we're allowing people to say, like, okay, this is normal. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out how we can make this better. And the desire is most important. The action is really important. So how do you follow up on that? How are
Yeah.
you living your values, right? How are you being Tara J. Frank is one of my favorite authors in this space. Is how are you being a way maker, right? Like creating a way for other people. Because I can't make you uh, believe that it's
Yeah.
important if you don't.
Yeah.
Like, and I will tell you, as a DEI practitioner, one of my biggest failures is trying to make people who didn't understand that or weren't interested in that to care. And
Yeah.
I burnt myself out, and I was tired, and I wasn't successful. So I've learned to eliminate that burden. I'm not going to put other people's reluctance on my back. I'm going to work with the people who are interested in transforming, the world that we live in.
Does it boil down to power dynamics? Could you like use the math of, if that's the right word, the math
Yeah.
of power dynamics to kind of say, this is why this stuff tends to happen. And this is why it's so hard to extricate, existing thinking, existing
Yeah.
processes, existing,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Does it all boil down to power?
It does. And like one of the it's so funny because, well, not I say that all the time. It's not funny. One of the one of the most important things I think that came out of this year and last year was Ava DuVernay's movie Origin, which was grassroots campaign based on the book that I loved, Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I literally, like, it's behind me. You can see it. Like, it's literally the Bible to me of power dynamics, and like how are we talking about what methods people who are in power who don't care about other people, what do they use to suppress other people?
Hmm.
And the movie does a beautiful job of talking about the creation of this book, but also the methods that people use. And it's throughout history. It's examining, Nazi Germany, the caste system in India, and how all that's linked to the civil rights era today, like slavery, all of that today. Because it goes sometimes, to me, beyond race. It's not necessarily
Hmm.
always race. Race is a component of that. But once we like say, okay, we've solved for race, we're still going to have other problems because people who want to stay in power will find
Yeah.
other things, right?
Yeah.
So how are we solving for the worst thing and then just focusing on the rest of it? You know what I mean? And I think power is one of those things.
If it's one of those things, can you identify a few other things that we can add into that gumbo? Right. If I see it in terms of math of power, what am I missing?
Yes. Well, if you're talking capitalism, you're talking about
Oh,
like
well,
how,
if you're going to throw capitalism in my face, late stage at that, I mean, my goodness.
yeah, like what we're talking about. And I just had this conversation with someone earlier today, and I don't know if you saw, but recently there was like this there's been this trend of can I pick your brain
Oh, yeah.
on the socials, right? And I don't think that people realize, who, especially those who are not part of marginalized communities, how using someone else's expertise for free is triggering for a lot of us, right? Because if you come from another marginalized community, whether it be the Black community, slavery, like we were literally a part of capitalism. Like our labor was part of
Sure.
foundation, and so um when I hear that, even though people like the person who's asking that, if they're not part of that community, absolutely don't see that. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're asking for something for free from
Yeah.
me, right? So we're talking about capitalism, we're talking about power. We're also talking about like how, if you read Caste, she uses all of these other things, like religion is used, legal, like laws, like enacting laws on, policing someone's hair, for example, the Crown
Oh
Act,
God.
right?
Oh
Where
man.
right, like, so you're policing my appearance, right? And so like there are all these different things that you can use in order to keep those who are suppressed and keep you into power. And
Yeah.
so power is one of, is how you flow up. How does it flow up so I can have the best experience in this community and you don't?
Yeah. So, taking kind of a broad look at the world as it stands today,
Yeah.
and DEI kind of exploded, beyond the kind of niche player, and
Yeah.
as a lifelong niche professional. Hi, how you doing? Um, it was great to see, I mean, not great to see, but and the reasons why it was horrible. However, it was great to see DEI start to enter the chat, right? For
Yeah.
serious, like to just be,
Yeah.
something everybody had to talk about. CEOs had to involve themselves with,
Mhm.
CEOs had to take seriously. It feels like, given vice presidents and chief diversity officers who are being let go, who are
Right.
leaving because they've been giving these titles and no authority or power with which to make change, that we've, if I map it to the hype cycle, Gartner's
Yeah.
hype cycle, we're entering what's, the trough of disillusionment. We had a big peak.
Mhm.
We were super excited. We're going to
Yep.
change the world.
Yep.
Oh, it's still kind of like this. This
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
It does that track to you? And if
Yeah.
so, where do we head? Where is this all moving towards?
Let me tell you why it tracks is because we got excited, and it says behind you strategy replaces effort. We had no strategy. We first of all, let's rewind. I don't
Yeah.
even think we were talking about the same things when we were saying DE and I is really important in the workplace. I think
Mm.
we didn't define the terms, what they meant to each of us, right? We weren't working with a universal definition of what DE and I means. So, so we went ahead full force with performative efforts to say, I really care about this thing that's very important, and I don't have a strategy, and I'm not sure we're talking about the same things, by the way, but we
Mm.
don't want to look like we're not part of the conversation. So let's do the black boxes. Let's hire marginalized people to do the work within our organization.
Consulting firms to do training exercises and check a
Right.
box.
Yeah, let's just roll out unconscious bias in a
Oh,
box.
yeah.
If even if that's not what our
Here,
problem
where is my magic wand? Because that just, bing, just solved everything, didn't it?
solved everything. And what I told people like all the time, once this is a journey. We are trying to eradicate some bad behaviors that go back hundreds of years in a workplace, right?
Yeah.
And so this wasn't going to change overnight, 3 years, 5 years. I don't even see this changing in my lifetime, to be honest with you. I mean, the digital age might sort of expedite that in a way that I don't comprehend right now. I literally didn't know that I would need a computer and I could use my phone 10 years ago. So that's possibly where I'm at. But without going backwards a little bit and saying, what's our strategy and what does diversity mean in this company? What is equity? What is in belonging? What is inclusion? And how are we measuring this? Because I think we also hired a bunch of people who really had great intentions, but for them it meant hiring a speaker, doing a book club,
Yeah.
um, you know, having ERGs do the labor of the organization, right? Like we did everything that looked really good on paper but doesn't move the needle. And
Mm.
so I don't know why, um and I think maybe it's because people didn't realize this, but DE and I should in your department should be embedded into the organization, and it should be a strategic area for the business so that from
You used a magic word in my head, a strategic process. So before I
yes,
let you kind of finish that thought, and I
yes,
do want you to finish it,
yeah,
when you say strategic, what does that mean? I'm a big believer that that's one of those words that everybody says, and
right.
that we have different definitions.
100%. And thank you for calling me out on that. So for
Oh,
me, what it means, it's true though, because what for me, what it means is you're doing a root cause analysis in your organization. So from an equity perspective, a diversity perspective, an inclusion perspective, and a belonging perspective, where are your gaps and what are you doing really well right now?
Okay.
Right? And not doing the PR spin where you're saying, hey, and I think there was one company when I first got the job, I was looking at like, how are people talking about their demographics? Because I think it's really important, especially from a branding perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would love as a talent leader, I want someone to go to our website and say like, okay, this is the breakdown, gender, race, who's having what experience in the organization. Data helps me tell the story about this organization before I interview.
Yeah. Quick question. If you could increase the offer acceptance rate by 20%, what would that be worth? Or maybe get 10% more prospects responding to your recruiters, what would that be worth? Or lowering your ad spend and your agency spend by 15, 20%, what would that be worth? I'm gonna bet it's worth a lot more than $1,500 a month. And that's how much it costs to build an employer brand, especially when you treat it as a subscription or employer brand as a service. If you want to learn more about how you can make these kinds of impacts almost immediately, check out employerbrandlabs.com. That's employerbrandlabs.com. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
I went to a couple of the larger companies and they'd be like, we are 30% female presenting. And I was like, but people can do math. So
Yeah.
like, I know what 100 minus 30 means. Like, that's the PR spin.
Yes.
I would like to know exactly like what, and like very cheery, right? So your diverse, yay, our diversity.
It's not all white dudes. We got one who isn't.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
How are you talking about your data in a way that allows people to understand where you are, where do you want to be and how you're measuring yourself and what's the accountability like, right?
Yeah.
So from a strategy perspective, do you know what those demographics look like in your organization? Are you talking to your finance team, your HR team, your legal team, and updating everyone and saying, demographically, this is what we look like, and here's how this is affecting these things, right? Marketing perspective, we're not marketing to these communities because we're not reflected, right? From a company perspective, we don't even know some of these communities are important to us from a strong business perspective. From a legal perspective, things are changing all the time. Your general counsel department needs to know exactly what's happening there. From an accounting perspective, like do we have checks and balances, right? Like, how is this working out from a vendor supplier diversity, right? Right. So, and then your HR team, I mean, y'all should be lock, stock, and barrel because it's like performance, it's employee engagement, it's what do your talent metrics look like? Like, without this department that allows you to understand who's in your organization and who's not, then how are you running the organization to the best of its ability? Like, who are you attracting?
Mm-hmm. So one of the challenges that I've started to really embrace, and Chad Sosh in a previous episode kind of nailed it at the same time, because he, in terms of talking about recruiting and TA, we have all these metrics about TA time to fill, but the business could not care less about them. They are not business metrics. They are lagging indicators. They're indicators. They're dashboard lights. They are not metrics.
Right.
You just listed a bunch of stuff that we should care about.
Yeah.
But none of them are business metrics. So how do we tie this stuff to caring about and wanting to and including and bringing all these people in and adding vendors and all that stuff? How do we connect that to business metrics? Because look, hey, you said capitalism first, so I'm going to ride that ride.
No, for sure.
Until you tie it to business, it's just a nice idea.
Right.
It's just, okay, I checked a box and we're going to get more of the same.
There are so many examples of how people have gotten it wrong that I hope that we're making that connection, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
Like Walmart and their Juneteenth ice cream should probably be a really good indicator of how we're probably getting it wrong, right? One of the early adapters of DE&I in corporate America was IBM at the time. And I believe this was like early 90s. And they had a head of DE&I. And that's not because, it wasn't internal, it was external. What they said was, as a large, printing and services company, we are missing out on the revenue of mom and pop neighborhood services and
Time
all
out.
of.
Did you mean to say Xerox or IBM? Because you said IBM. I want to make sure your
I
tones.
think it's IBM,
Okay,
but
because then you said printing, and I'm like, oh, is that Xerox?
well, they did.
Yeah.
So services,
Okay.
all of those
Yes.
different
Yes.
services.
Yeah.
So all of those different services that you offer from a business
Okay.
perspective.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure we were
No,
nailing it. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling out. But it's about what services are we offering and how come we're just focused on these large corporations. There's other money to be made out there.
Yeah.
And so how do we get into these communities that think that we are too big for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did is they did DE&I. They had they trained salespeople that they hired. They were part of these communities, right? So there was a connection, a familiarity, and then they increased their revenue. And then they started talking about, okay, the people within the organization, what is their experience? We've
Mm.
hired all these people. How do we retain them? How are we making sure that we're amplifying those voices, right? You start doing executive sponsors, and their executive sponsors, I remember, didn't even actually reflect the group that they were part of. So,
Mm-hmm.
the women's group had, the male CFO as their sponsor. And that male CFO is like, I had no idea all these crazy things were happening to these women in this group. This is
Mm-hmm.
wild.
Yeah.
No, like so it's a matter of awareness, but you're increasing the strength of your business. Listen, and also the census is not on the side of those who are trying to remain homogenous, right? Like
Mm.
in about 20 plus years or so, things are going to shift in a wild way. And these new generations that are coming into the workplace are not about that life at all,
Yeah.
right? Like they are going to look different. They're going to think differently. And things that matter to them are going to be different than those who are trying to maintain a status quo. So not only are they going to be your customers, they will be your candidates, they will be your employees. Are you prepared for that?
Yeah.
Can your business sustain that change from a census perspective?
Yeah. I always kind of bristle against this idea of saying businesses should do a thing because it's
Yeah.
morally good. I'm like, that is I don't
Yeah.
understand. That's like a rubber hammer. It's like, I don't know where you think that's going. I don't know what
Yeah.
you're trying to do. In the end, businesses care about making money, saving money, generating customers, limiting
100%.
risk, and stroking executive egos at the end of it.
100%.
And you have to tie it to that. And I love this idea that if it's a business, it is about the money. So let's start with the money. How do we use DEI to generate income, to generate customers, to expand the reach of this
Yeah.
business? And it just follows. Hey, if we have to service and talk to people, let's go trans. Let's go trans community, which is a
Yeah.
community I know like jack about. Like that
Right.
is, I'm 51. It makes no sense to me. I'm like,
Right.
cool, go on, do what you got to do.
Right.
But like, I wouldn't know how to service that community. So I guess that means I have to start hiring some people to understand, to connect, to make, oh, this is why they talk this way. This is what these terms mean. This is what they care about. This is what their drivers are. And suddenly I've got a fairly diverse internal staff.
Yeah. But here's the other part that's going to be hard for people to understand, because I don't know if this has happened. I don't study business as well as I'd like, but there's a systemic um, there's a systemic piece to this that you have to look at your business and pull apart, because hiring all those people in terms of them staying and
Mhm.
having the experience in the organization that you need them to have,
Yeah.
that they need to have, is going to be incredibly important. And this is why it's very hard, is because when we get down to brass tacks and we say, for some reason our HRIS system won't allow us to add non-binary.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry, Joe,
Yeah.
Joe,
Sure.
whatever. I have to use a pronoun in order to
I have
hire
to
you.
shoehorn you in.
Yes. What what a horrible experience that must be,
Yeah.
right? So like systemically speaking, you've got to be prepared to pull apart a lot of different things and feelings and attachments that you have in order to make space for this new kind of business that will thrive.
Yeah.
And is that wrong? No, because I feel like any business that stays stagnant is going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So your risk has to elevate a bit. You've got to be able to say, okay, so what, that process doesn't work, that's fine. What I've encountered in consulting and working with other businesses is that there's this mentality, especially if you've been working for a while in corporate America. for some reason you want these people entering the workforce to have the same miserable experience you did, because you're paying, like, you got to pay the dues. Sorry, this sucks.
Yes.
I
Yes.
had to do it, so you
Yes.
have to do it
There
too.
it is. That's the phrase. That's the magic that seems to just whitewash, and I'm using that term very
Yes.
specifically, that just seems to whitewash this shitty, crappy, garbage experience that, and in TA, we seem to be completely okay. I've always joked that, look, if you time traveled someone from 1980 into our
Yeah.
experience, they'd be like, what's Google? End of conversation. That's the only thing that doesn't make sense, because otherwise it maps perfectly. And it
Exactly.
seems crazy to
Yeah.
kind of just say, why is it that sales is expected to change and product and code and all these teams are expected to change, but it's TA and HR that say, yeah, let's just keep it the way it always has been.
Right.
Let's just force people through these channels.
It's always the support functions, and I have a theory. I think it's a lot of times it's because not because the unwillingness of the leaders in those departments, but some leaders of business do not hold support functions in a high enough regard to be able to say you need to change along with the business.
Yep.
They don't want to either deal with it because they feel like it's administrative and it's
Mm-hmm.
not sexy and it's not as interesting or creative. It doesn't get you on the front page of whatever Ad Age or New York Times or whatever it is, by you saying, like, we transformed this accounting business so that we're tracking supplier diversity. Like,
Yeah.
they think that that's boring. It's much more exciting to be like, we launched this new product. Isn't it shiny, fast, new, great, amazing?
Totally.
But you've got to start paying attention to your support functions, because they are the backbone of the business. And they have to be held as high accountability in terms of change as the other parts of the business. They can't stay the same, because
Mm-hmm.
the world is not staying the same.
It's almost as if they're held in such low regard. There's no
Yes.
accountability for
Yeah.
be better. It's okay that you kind of suck because we hate you too. And we're
Yeah.
trying to squeeze you down into as small a bucket as
Right.
possible so we can ignore you forever.
Yeah.
So therefore, don't spend the money on getting better ATSs and better onboarding and better outreach and better conversations and better mentorship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The code is always, you're not a revenue generating department, so
Yeah.
therefore you have to make the cuts first.
Yeah.
You've got to sacrifice first, which should be the reverse, because if you're caring about the strength of your business and attracting people, those support functions are the ones that keep them there, employed, active, developed.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot they don't have to worry about if your support functions are working the way that they're supposed to.
Totally, totally. So let's kind of pivot slightly, because I think we haven't spelled out the idea of, and this is a thing I've been struggling with personally, to say, how do I communicate this idea that there is an intersection between employer brand, where I live,
Yeah.
DEI, where you live? How do you see these things connecting, and most importantly, I think, supporting one another? How is EB helping drive employer brand? How is employer brand helping, or not? How is EB helping DEI? How is DEI helping employer brand?
There's two things that I think are so important here, and that's because we both have to be authentic or else it does not work.
Yeah.
So employer branding doesn't work if your DEI team is just doing book clubs and, celebrating with
Bringing in speakers.
theme-centered foods,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we had like Cuban food today for, like, whatever. Like, what are you supposed to do with that from an employer branding perspective?
Totally.
Right. And then
I'll tell you. I will tell you what the industry will tell you they have to do. And I've been running these audits, and it's March. So
Yeah.
what posts do you think I'm seeing a lot of? Yeah. Hey,
Let me
meet a woman, tag IWD, tag. It's like the way they're structuring it makes it sound like, oh, it's March, I guess we're allowed to talk about women now. You're like, I'm sorry, are you kidding me? And then you scroll back and you go, oh, look, guess who they're talking about 3 weeks ago? You're like, oh, it just feels like it is the epitome of tokenization. It murders my soul.
It's horrible because, especially, I feel like with all the political climate we have this year, it has been severely disappointing from a DE&I standpoint and a branding standpoint. I feel like for Black History Month, this was like the lowest.
Yeah, it was very quiet.
Posts. It was super quiet. I even feel like Women's History Month is super quiet right now because of all of the political climate. I feel like companies are deciding to roll back and think that silence is better, but silence will kill more than you making a mistake publicly,
Yeah.
because you know who's paying attention to that, your customers and your candidate. I actually tweeted at one of my favorite food newsletters. I was like, so nothing for Black History Month in food? I'm so sorry, but wait, what now? Like nothing at all. You have a daily newsletter and we can't get anything on Black History Month
That's
about
crazy.
food.
Yeah.
There are so many great food scholars out there that are talking about our contributions to the culture of this country.
African cuisine blew up over the last 3 years. Like if you had asked this
Right,
conversation 5 years, I would have said collard greens, okra. I mean,
right.
sweet pea or some peas, black eyed peas. Like I don't know what I mean, but now it's like I know what mafungo is. I know what these things are.
Yes. I mean, we have people like Jessica Harris, who, you know, is a food scholar who was doing this in the like 60s, who got popular now because of High on the Hog on Netflix, which was one
Right.
of the most popular shows that they had. So now we're not talking about any of this now. And I think that's where we are understanding how important DE&I and branding and employer branding come together, right? Because there, and I think you can see it also in talent branding too, because I think there's been this regression of caring about the candidate experience, caring about the customer experience, and caring about the experience of people within this country. They're all tied together,
Yeah.
right? So if you're saying you don't care about it, then don't do anything about it. Then I'm torn between, okay, I respect you because at least you're telling me how you feel, but what's going to happen when you need me?
Yeah. Like I used to use, oh, you care about women. That is the signal
Mhm.
you want to send to the world.
Right.
Okay, where's your mother's room?
Yeah.
Okay, do you offer the bare legal minimum of family leave? And
Mhm.
now it feels like this year it's got to be, so who are you, which politicians are you giving to this year,
Yeah.
company? Because
Yeah.
they have drawn a very clear line that if you're on this side, reproductive,
Yeah.
just bye-bye,
Right.
just wear the red coats, just be done with
Right.
it, go ahead. And that feels to me like getting to that word authenticity, that
Yeah.
what do you really stand, what does this company stand for, what do they care about, where do they invest,
Mhm.
and ultimately what a company cares about they spend money on. And so
Right.
you can say you care about women, where
Yeah.
do you spend your money? And that to
Yeah.
me feels like the crux of so many of the conversations.
Yeah.
Looking at all these social posts, hey, we brought in a speaker, as you said, hey, we did a thing, hey, we did a
Yeah.
thing, good for you. What did you talk about? What did you
Yes.
learn? What are
Yep.
you changing? And those parts of the conversation do not exist in social media for corporate channels, which it feels like, I
Yeah.
get that you need to check the box, but where's that going?
Where is that going? And why are you wasting money doing this stuff if it has no ROI? Because you know what? Speakers are not cheap.
No.
Speakers are not cheap. And so and speakers are fine as an add-on to your
If they
program.
create change.
Exactly. But your speaker budget should not be larger than your actual audit budget.
But yeah, oh, that's fair. Totally fair.
So, to your point, I don't know if companies are trying to tell us that they don't care about people in general, because there's this other thing where I think a lot of companies they don't understand that your candidates and your employees are also your customers.
Mhm.
So, like, they're not separate.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, people have a long memory. I know I do. And so if there's something that comes out and I'm like, aren't you that company that did that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what you,
Mhm.
so now you want me, like, we're not goldfish, we don't have short-term memories. Like, I don't understand the strategy behind when we're talking about branding, how they're not all connected and how we're
Yeah.
trying to be authentic. I don't understand it.
Yeah, there, it does feel like it's, what do you want to hear? Here, I'll
Yeah.
say it. Don't
Yeah.
ask me for proof. Don't ask me for evidence. Don't ask me for specifics. I've told you the thing you want to do, what you wanted
Yeah.
to hear. Now apply for a job. Now buy a thing. Do the thing. And it
I
just, yeah,
said
it's
so.
brutal.
Take my word for it. I said so. All right, in this day and age, when like social media is and the thing that gives me hope is that people and their and telling their stories about their interaction with these candidate in these companies, like, you know, the woman who went viral for taping her firing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have a problem with that, to be honest with you, because first of all, we need to think about the generations entering the workforce now have always been digital, so they don't know. It's not like they turn on digital to do a gotcha. It's
Yeah.
literally their entire lives.
Yes.
So like,
Yes.
where she would, video her firing, she's also showing you what she eats in a day. Like literally, not that they're not different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's not a gotcha like most older generations would think. It's a
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, it's not. No, that's
It's just
normal.
evidence.
It's
It's just,
evidence.
this is
And
a data point I ran into.
yes, and sharing that with other people that are having the same situation happen to them. By the way, this is how my experience went. So therefore, I'm going to share it with you on a social media platform. We're
Yeah.
not in person as much as we used to be, right? Social media is how people come together. That's how they forge friendships. It's not foreign. So like this idea that people are starting to counteract the company PR and branding with their truthful, experience is exciting to me.
The point or the purpose of employer brand is to help people choose your company as a place to work over other companies. Now, put that way, suddenly employer brand doesn't seem so complicated. It doesn't seem so crazy. And it seems like something your company could take advantage of. And it is. Take a look at employerbrand.ing, employerbrand.ing, or employer branding, and you can find hundreds of resources, either free or dirt cheap, to help you understand what employer brand really is, how it really works, how to measure it, how to value it, how to talk about it, how to sell it to your boss. So check out employerbrand.ing for all sorts of employer brand resources to help you take advantage of your company's employer brand. So one of the things I think is interesting, a while ago I worked for Universum, and they have all this data about candidates and what their current state of, what they like, what they care about, what motivates them, what moves them. And I was really fascinated by this kind of factoid I found in the data that said, if a company is known as being very pro-woman, right? They're doing all the things right. They're offering FMLA. They're doing all the stuff they're supposed to be doing. And they're known for supporting women's, initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Women didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
The audience who cared the most was an
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ plus audience, because
Mm-hmm.
they felt like, well, if you care about women and women are one step below the totem pole, well, then maybe I got a shot in here.
It's
Whereas women had felt like, look, I'm fighting what I'm fighting. I got to do what I got to do. Great. You said that. Good for you. I'll figure it out later. It was so interesting how the signaling is
mm-hmm.
never the thing you think it is, or to whom you think it's being signaled
Yeah.
to. And there's
Yeah.
so much in, employer branding and recruiting where it's like, just, kind of, how your job postings read,
Yeah.
how the language you're choosing to use, that it is always masculine, that it is always like, he will do this, he is a boss, all that stuff. And I know that there's companies like Textio who've done a great job kind of like, huh, what? And so you're like, okay, I know it. But at the same time, there's such a business looks like me.
Yeah.
Staff looks like someone maybe like you, right? It's a different, there's this weird kind of like baked in model. And it just feels like this changes because you can't say no men, you can't say no white people, but what
Right.
you can say is, no, the door is literally open and we
Yeah.
want you to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. I think that we don't even know the intricacies of our communication at this point. I think we've been on autopilot for so long.
So true.
And so the discovery of the language and how it resonates, and the assumption, right? Like if you go back to science and you just like are experimenting, you might assume the outcome, but it might be something entirely different. Like for women, it's been what, almost 100+ years of fighting for equality, right? And
Yeah.
so like, you know, and to that extent, it was also intersectional because not Black women, not other women of color, but specifically white women, are like, we've been at this for 100 years. We got our vote. We've got these other things where we're still not making the same money that that a white or my white male counterpart is. Not even including this whole group of other people who are having a host of other issues as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could do your FMLA, you could care about all of these different things. At the end of the day, does my paycheck look like the other person's?
Yeah.
Because I have a family to feed too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's so much messy in how we value an individual's contribution to a business. And
Yes.
that is why we say things like, don't tell anybody your salary, because that's how business kind of controls and manages and pays one person more than the other. It
Yeah.
is endemic to, you know, am I allowed to work? Is the work I do from home that
Yeah.
is measured productive at the same level as someone in the office? Why do they get the promotion and I don't? Like,
Proximity bias. Yep.
exactly. All this stuff gets messy, and it's like it's so hard to unpack and say, look, here's a thing you can do. Here's a solution. Here is a solve, because ultimately it's business is designed to treat humans as cogs. And
Yeah.
when you're not a cog, when you have to be creative, when you have to be collaborative, when you have to turn 2 + 2 into 47, which we all seem to do these days, and that's kind of the job. How do you
Mhm.
measure that? How do you know, is it 46 or 47 or 48?
Yeah.
All this stuff makes it so hard, and makes it so hard for people like us to kind of say, how do we fix this? But it also makes it so easy for the business to say, shut up, shut up, shut
It's
up.
true because it's really challenging to fix these things. I was just having this conversation earlier with someone about, like, even if we think about like digital transformation of the workplace, with the use of AI, is it cheating? Like, do you feel, because a lot of people, black, brown, Asian, if you are not, a non-white person in the
Mhm.
workplace, a lot of times your work is predicated on task orientation. And do I
Yes.
feel like the work that I'm doing is valued enough, because I'm probably going to be the first cut when the business says we're not making the profits that we need to. So we will be part of that wave that gets laid off. So proving value, right? In terms of what you were just saying, like, how do I prove my value? So again, I got to be 10 times better than the average person, or what?
Yeah.
Like, how does this work out for me? Because we've determined that that sort of work is not equitable, because we can look at pay transparency, we can look at, pay laws, performance management, audits, all of those different things show that it's not equitable. So I'm the most in danger. So
Yeah.
I feel the most in danger, right? So it's really fascinating for companies to just be like, I don't understand why people feel so, you know, because the data tells us so, right?
Yeah.
If your company has not reached gender parity, right, from a pay perspective, why are you baffled by why people still feel
Yeah.
vulnerable?
Yeah. If I look at the exec suite and it is all white dudes,
Yeah.
where am I going? Congratulations, you're 49% women, but they're all at the first two levels of the company, and they
Yeah.
tend to get, they fall out as they move up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is somewhat baffling sometimes to see the willful blindness of leadership to say, what are you talking about? Everything is great.
Yes.
Why are you complaining? Why is this a problem? And you're like, do you
Right.
not see the news? Do you not see interest rates and
Right.
homeowners and student loans and?
And well, that's when they start bringing in diversity of thought.
Okay. All right, bring it, because this is a thing. I want to talk about this because I have mixed feelings on the intersection of diversity of human, diversity of thought.
Yeah. Here's
Hit
the
me.
thing, is that diversity of thought is not an endangered uh, community within the workplace that's identifiable,
Yeah,
right? Um, Diversity of thought is a theory and it's a culture that you could possibly foster. But if you don't solve for the diversity issue amongst visible or neurodiverse people, like how people look and how they function within your organization, then you're not solving for diversity of thought, because it's also assuming that those people don't have a diversity of thought. What
yeah,
we're trying to solve for is bias in terms of race, proximity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, neurodiversity, tangible things that have had people separated from society because someone thinks that those are weaknesses and not part of a strong society. It's not the diversity of thought that has had people sort of like, I don't know, because those people tend to be able to either, mask it, right? So
hmm
like, oh, I can mask it. I can pass. I can not decide I don't have that diversity of thought at all. But if you're solving for the person who's having the worst experience within your organization, then all other things should be able to then unfold, right, for
I
you.
love that. I love that idea that you solve for the worst. You solve for the most complex scenario,
Yes.
and it ripples out to everybody, and everybody benefits.
Yeah, because no one's saying that you don't have diversity of thought. I'm just saying stop using it as though it means that you are a Asian American female who may be first generation within your organization who is not making the same amount of money as the white male. That's not diversity of thought is not having that same experience.
Yeah. Can you almost say, and I'm thinking out loud here, can you
Yeah.
almost say it is infinitely more easier for you to accept diversity thought once you've learned how to experience and accept diversity of human? Once you
Yeah.
understand that it can come in any shape or
Yeah.
size or
Yeah.
accent or structure, once you
Right.
can kind of get, I understand what it's like to work side by side with a black person. And I imagine
Yes.
for a lot of people, that's a relatively new experience and that's terrifying, but
Right.
here we are. Once you're like, oh, I am now able and open enough to
Yeah.
realize that there's new information coming to me and I can,
Yeah.
it influences me, which means I'm now able to hear those
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would have been up close because the shape or the channel it came from.
100%. And even better understanding that black means very different, like different communities, right? It's not a monolith. So you're saying, am I a, Caribbean immigrant? Am I African immigrant? I am a descendant of, US slavery. That is exactly what my background is. I don't always share a cultural identity
Mhm.
with people who look like me who come from other countries, but there's an assumption that I do,
Yeah.
right? Like, because someone who doesn't know anything about my background assumes that we are all the same and that we understand the same things. And that's actually just not true. So then that expands your thought, right? Because then you're going, when I'm talking to Tara about this thing, when we're talking about Southern migration and the Great Migration, she's not going to understand Trinidadian history. So, like, like Joe Beth over there might, who is Trinidadian, right? So, like, we're all learning something new. And that's what I'm saying is like diversity of thought comes with all these other things, but you can't separate it. It can't
Yeah.
be like, I am discriminated against because I have diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like that. I'm going to chew on that
Yeah.
just for myself, because I think there's a lot to still
Yeah.
unpack, but it
Yes.
does help me kind of give me a frame of reference on how to think about that stuff. I appreciate
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. That's what it's about. But that's what these conversations are for.
that's true. That's true. And look, and I'm gonna, I do always kind of enter these conversations with some trepidation. Like there's so many ways I could say something just dumbass stupid, not realizing I have said something dumbass stupid. I
Yeah.
probably have said something dumbass stupid today in this conversation and not realized it. But but that's just we're people. That is, how do we allow people to come in? And I think every time I feel like, okay, we're starting to get somewhere, it feels like there's a new audience,
Mm-hmm.
neurodiversity,
Yeah.
LGBT, trans, like the trans one just kind of throws me because I literally go, I have no idea
Yeah.
what is going on in your brain where that makes any kind of sense to you.
Yeah.
And go for it. Do what you
Yeah.
got to do. Be
Yeah.
you, and that's great. But I don't have to understand it. I just
No.
have to kind of be cool with people are going to want to live their lives. And what's really interesting to me is as we get deeper into digital, as we get deeper into this complicated world of ours, we find new ways of being ourselves and
Yeah.
communicating who we are to other people and saying, look, you're into X, Y, and Z. Cool. I don't care. But
Yeah.
good for you, because now you're going to find your community, and now you're going to find ways of going deeper into who you are.
I think that's one of the things that's really interesting when that's why I lean into education, because a lot of these things are not new. If you think about, when the onslaught of the LGBTQ and the gay community, and we started talking about that pretty regularly and normalizing it, a lot of
Mhm.
people were just like, I've heard this even from family members of mine. But back then we didn't have, like, the gay people weren't as prominent. And I was
Yeah,
like, how would you know? You forced them in the closet.
yeah,
You don't
exactly.
know. Like, it's not, what did you expect them to just be like, in spite of your prejudices, they were still going to be loud? No, there's a fear. So, if you look at the movie, Bayard Rustin story
Mm.
that Coleman Domingo was in, like, literally the architect of the civil rights movement could not be out and proud in his community, right?
Yeah,
because of people's prejudices. So like this idea when you say like they're new communities, they're probably not.
Yeah.
It's just that we haven't been able to allow people to show up as themselves because we've said this is what society looks like. And if you don't belong to this version of society, then there's something wrong with you. You're a freak and you're this and you're that.
Yeah.
We're not giving that space and saying like, be who you are and how can we support you? Caring about humanity is about that.
Yeah. I heard a podcast about, I'm going to say 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fuzzy on this. It was really interesting. It was a Black woman who is a ad strategist. So
Mm-hmm.
someone who's there to kind of say, what is the insight about why audience X would want to buy product Y?
Yeah.
And she says, all the best strategists are in marginalized communities because
Mm-hmm.
they have grown up with their head on a swivel. They're
Yeah.
always looking around for who's going to get me, who's concerned about me, who's looking at me funny. And I thought that was really interesting to
Mm-hmm.
say, this is a way of saying, how do I take some pretty ugly history and
Yeah.
use it to my advantage to say,
Mm-hmm.
now, because I'm always looking at other things and wondering, is this concerning or do I have to worry about that? She had a very interesting set of perspectives
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
would imagine your standard. I just went to Ivy League and now I have a great, my dad owns the company. And so now I'm a strategist too, that dude isn't going to have. And I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting how taking your
Yeah.
experiences, your negative experiences, and how they can sometimes turn into skill sets and approaches that are valuable to businesses.
100%. They're called lived experiences. I tell people that all the time. Like for me, you know, in my community, we have lived with centered whiteness as a media concept, right?
Yeah.
So, what you probably learned as a teenager, all the commercials and ads, I already know, I know those too, but you also don't have the added benefit of understanding, how great it was to watch Yo MTV Raps and like have it catered towards you at the same
Yeah.
time and you feel that's belonging, or Soul Train, right? And
Yeah.
like Afro Sheen and Johnson and Johnson, like, you know what I'm saying? We have multiple things coming at us and like, we contain multitudes. Like I celebrated, Breakfast Club's turning, what it was 1984
Yep.
on Saturday. They all met for detention, March 24th, 1984, 86. And I was like, happy Breakfast Club Day. That's my generation. I
Yep.
understand that. But like, how many of you are also going to be like, oh my God, it's today, school
Don
day.
Cornelius's birthday.
Right. School days launched, whatever, the launch of the HBCUs or
Yeah.
whatever. Like we have a lived experience because we've been in this country, but also not regarded as a community that's super viable, but still participating in the community as well,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we're still paying taxes, we're still seeing your ads, we're still not seeing ourselves on television. However, we're still being catered towards. And I think most communities of color can say the same thing, right?
Totally. So I want to close this out. I mean, a little snarky, right? It's a podcast called the Definition of Insanity. We're going to get a little
Yes.
snarky, right? If we haven't
Yeah.
already. As inside DEI, is there
Yeah.
anything that you're totally sick of talking about? Is there anything that you're like, can we just be done with this and move? Whoa, I got a face. Either I am onto something or I am terrified. I don't know. I'm about to find out. What are you sick of talking or hearing about?
The business case for DE&I.
Hmm.
I'm so tired of people saying, what's the business case of DE&I? Because it's, and the only time I'll actually do is when I'm talking to students who are entering the workforce. I did speak to a group of students at Loyola Marymount, and I was like, hey, listen, unless you got like a whole hidden budget in your company and you enjoy paying out discrimination cases, yes, you should have DE&I in your company. Like, I don't know. Like, do you enjoy this? Or,
Yeah.
you can fix
Yeah.
all this and keep your money. Like, that's just bad business of paying out all these discrimination cases. But that's my point, is like, why do I have to keep justifying that people coming into your workplace thriving, having psychological safety, not encountering, biases because of what they look like, how they sound, how they live their lives, what the way they think is bad? Like, what? I don't like, because at the end of the day, we are looking for people who are going to come in and do their best work. How can I do my best work if I'm not feeling like this environment fosters that, or I'm worried about what's happening in the world and my company is not even addressing it,
Yeah.
right? That's just and that's the commonsensical piece that I'm talking about. Like, can we hold these leaders accountable for them to think about people as a strategy, not just business, like not just the revenue, not just like product launches, but what's your people strategy?
Yeah, love it. Tara Turk-Haynes, thank you so much. I hope this has been a fun conversation for you and not a total waste of time. This was a blast for me, and all I care about is me, obviously. So there you go. I told you we get snarky.
Each other.
There it is. There it is. Tara, thanks so much for being here. If anybody's looking to hear more about you or hear more from you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Go to my website, equityactivations.com. There's a lot of content there. You can book some time with me. But yeah, I want to help businesses be better.
There you go. Honestly, what better way to end than make businesses better? I love that. Tara, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.